Are you a businesswoman who is finding it challenging to get your ideas across and make a point? Welcome to Speakers Who Get Results with Elizabeth Bachman, a podcast dedicated to helping women get the visibility they want, whether making a speech or talking in a meeting. Every week, get valuable lessons from Elizabeth or learn from her roundtable conversations with experts and speakers on how to make a difference, not just a point. On to the show with your host, Elizabeth Bachman.
Hello and welcome to Speakers Who Get Results. I'm Elizabeth Bachman, your host, and this is the podcast where we interview experts from around the world on such subjects as leadership, diversity, resilience, and presentation skills and communication. Before I tell you about my awesome guest today, I'd like to invite you to see how your presentation skills are doing. If you're curious where you are strong as a presenter and where you might not be, you can take our free 4-minute assessment at speakforresultsquiz.com. That's www.speakforresultsquiz.com. And that's where you can get a free assessment of where you're strong and where perhaps a little bit of support could get you the results you need and the recognition that you deserve. My guest today is Saray Khumalo. Saray is the first Black African woman to have reached the summit of Mount Everest and, of course, gotten back down again. She has wonderful things to say about leadership, finding your strengths, finding your why, and making smart choices. It took her 4 tries to get to the summit of Mount Everest. Sometimes it's important to choose to turn back, even if you can see the goal, to choose to turn back to keep the entire trip in mind. And I can certainly see how that applies to business and to life. Saray has so much wisdom and energy and experience. She did all of this in order to raise money for schools. And let me give you her official bio. Saray is an award-winning mountaineer who provides world-class transformational coaching to entrepreneurs, executives, business professionals, and sales teams all over the world. As an experienced business executive, she has a solid track record in some of South Africa's leading financial institutions as an e-commerce and loyalty specialist. In 2019, on her 4th attempt, Saray summited Mount Everest, becoming the first Black African woman to summit the mountain, a demonstration of her resilience, irrespective of her starting point and her past unsuccessful attempts. Saray uses a combination of mountaineering triumphs and her ability to steer businesses to partner with organizations that are on a transformational journey to enable individuals and teams to identify their personal and business goals and to explore and unleash their full potential and achieve those set goals. She's the founder of Summits with a Purpose, which is an initiative that has raised funds and built physical and digital libraries in disadvantaged African schools. She believes that literacy and education has the power to change the narrative for the next generation. I know you're going to enjoy the conversation with Saray. She amazes me. I am so honored to have on the podcast. Let's go to the interview. Saray Khumalo, I am so excited to have you as a guest on Speakers Who Get Results. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You were recommended to me, and I looked at your list and your page and your resume and all the things you do, and I went, I have to talk to this woman. So wonderful. First of all, congratulations on all the mountain climbing you've done. I look at mountains, but I don't climb them. So I am in awe of you. Before we get started on the questions, I have a lot of questions for you. Before we get started, who would be your dream interview? If you could interview someone who's no longer with us, who would it be? What would you ask them? And who should be listening?
My dream interview would have to be with none other Mandela, because after going through so much, how can he still see past all the hurt or the evil violation and still find a way to forgive and foster a rainbow nation, one that forces the nation to celebrate diversity and move together in harmony. Has it been perfect? Absolutely not. But I believe that it starts the conversation that the world needs to hear, the whole world. I mean, if we look at what's happening now in Eastern Europe, it's exactly that. It's people not seeing beyond the differences, not celebrating the strength that come through our differences, and actually moving forward in harmony. That's the only way as a generation we can leave the world just a little bit better. Is it easy? Absolutely not, which is why I would love to understand how he was able to do that after being locked up for 27 years in prison.
Did you ever see him live?
Yes, I did, but I never had the privilege or an honor to meet him. But I did, yes, I did see him live.
I remember all growing up with signs saying "Free Nelson Mandela." And when all that happened, South Africa and Ireland are the two I can think of where countries that really did try to mend the differences, not perfect, but at least not blowing each other up anymore. And there's got to be a way to do it. Yes.
Absolutely. And it starts with one man. It starts with one conversation. Otherwise, there is a lot of differences that we can all go after and would never agree. But at some point, we need to agree to disagree, not for only our sake, but for the sake of generations to come.
Yes. Well, wonderful. Well, I wanted to interview you because, yes, the marvelous things that you are doing, you climb mountains and use that to raise money for summits with a purpose. Tell us how that started and what you're doing now.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So Summits with a Purpose is an initiative that I started in 2012 initially. But at the beginning, I called it 7 Summits with a Purpose. I believe that I'm really an accidental mountaineer. I was doing Kilimanjaro as a bucket list item. In the process of us doing Kili, I said to the team that was going to say, why don't we actually use the climb to raise money for Kids Heaven, which is a home that looks after street kids. But all this came after I lost my older sister in 2009. In 2009, I got a call, I'm at work, to say, Florence has died. That was a bit of a shock because I wasn't expecting it. And I started going through memories of us as children and wondering, did she live her purpose? Mind you, she probably did. Maybe it was to just wake me up and remind me to get out of my comfort zone. And I started questioning her life, mine, and I looked at, am I really successful? Because at the time I thought, I'm a manager at work. I've got a house, I've got a car, I've got a family. I must be successful. And when she died, I looked at it and I said, but I'm not. Because I went back to our childhood when my grandfather, who was a pastor, always used to say, if you don't live a life of service, that's a life wasted. But as a child, you don't understand what that means,
Right.
And then I went back to my mother, who was a single mother, raising 7 children in a patriarchal environment, that always said to her, Helen, you need to get a boy because these girls will never look after you. And she would come home at some point. Mind you, she tried 6 times and got 7 girls. 2 of my sisters are twins.
So she had to have a son, you mean? She had to have a son. People didn't take her seriously because she only had daughters.
Exactly. And she actually, would come home and said, you are enough. Nobody should tell you that there is stuff that you can't. You can only limit yourself. And she had this saying to say, the sky is the limit. So in those moments when I was thinking about my sister, I went back to those conversations and I said, am I reaching for the sky? And the answer was no. Am I living a life of service? And the answer was no. And, Elizabeth, 4 months later, I quit my job. I didn't know at the time, but now when I reflect, I was trying to find my purpose, trying to find my why, trying to find something that had meaning, that either had, that ticked both me reaching for the skies as well as living a life of service. And I found myself in this organization that encouraged employees, different departments, to adopt charities that are doing good, whether animal-related, children. And we adopted a home that looked after street kids. And at this time, there was trouble in Southern Africa. Zimbabwean children were coming through, kids from the Congo, and they had between 180 and 200 children at any one time. And we every month would go and take these kids in to go hiking, show them how to be a family. So I'll take my children, other people in the department will take their children, just once a month, one Sunday a month. And every month for us to do that, we needed to ask for contributions from other employees. And people would see you coming and they would know it's that time of the month. There she comes to donation. Donor fatigue. People are tired of giving.
Yeah.
So that's when I said, look, we're climbing Kili, we're paying for ourselves. Why not sell them the experience, the pictures, in exchange for them giving us some money? And we did a gift and gain, page. We collected funds enough to build an outdoor gym because they didn't have a playground in their home. And we also converted a room into a library. And although summiting Kili was a challenge in itself for me at the time, coming to hand over this library and study and the outdoor gym was such a summit of note. It just took me to another level. And one of the kids in the home said to me, do you really come from the township? So the township, if you understand South Africa well, that's where Black people were confined into the townships and white people stayed in the suburbs. And initially, I thought she was joking because we always say, oh, Black people don't swim. So I laughed. I thought she was just making a joke. And she says, no, because people like us don't do things like this. And I stopped. I said, what do you mean? She says, no, because there are children that come from Europe, Germany, and other places. When they come as exchange students and they leave, they're the ones that do things like this. And it just dawned on me that she was serious, and I related to what she was saying because growing up myself, watching Wonder Woman, Superman, and all these heroes and cartoons, they didn't look like me. They were flying around. Nobody around me flew. Admittedly, they were cartoons, but I just understood that there were heroes and there was me. And that bothered me. I'm a mother of two. I came home and I wondered, what I could do to show my kids that help comes from within before they looked elsewhere. That it didn't matter what they looked like, what the world said about them. They too can step on top of the world. So I started the Summits with a Purpose. And I said, I'm going to step on top of the highest peak on every continent around the world, but use it to raise money for education. Because education is the one thing that my mother, my family invested in me, that's been able to do a lot more for me and the communities around me. And it is the equalizer, and it's the one way we can change the narrative for the next generation of Africans. So that's Summits with a Purpose.
That's wonderful. That's really marvelous. And you do so many things. I'd be curious, it took you 4 tries to climb Mount Everest, and you were stopped by disasters where people died. And the 3rd time you were stopped because you yourself were injured. How did you pick yourself up and decide to go again?
That for me is one of the things that I actually use in my coaching. If there was ever a time that I would have given up, it was the first time I went on to Everest in 2014. I got up there, even though I had read and I had watched documentaries about people dying on Everest. It happens to them and not me. I mean, and I had all these romantic ideas about what Everest is, and I got there on the third day. It was the 18th of April. A big Sirac fell and an avalanche killed 16 Sherpas. And immediately it was clear for me, because before that happened, I was the least experienced. I had a level of imposter syndrome, like I didn't belong, like I needed to prove myself to these guys so that they can be confident enough or trust me to be on the same rope with them. Because all I had done was Kilimanjaro, and I went and trained in the French Alps. And I could feel that. But when this incident happened, and I went to the dining tent, which is a place that everybody gathers, and I said, what are we going to do? And I realized they were just as scared as I was. They didn't have the answers, even though one of them had been climbing for, I think, 27 years.
Mm-hmm.
And it dawned on me at the time that this was a personal journey, that I needed to figure out what I would learn from it, and that will help me decide how best to move forward. And this, I came home to people saying, "Wow, you tried. You don't have to do it again." But one thing that I looked at is the Sherpas that died were more experienced than I was. Mm-hmm. There was a bit of survivor's guilt. Did they die because I wanted to?
That was my next question, was how did you deal with the guilt that you survived?
Yes. Oh, no, that was actually terrible. But one of the things that, I told myself, and I believe very strongly, is that we all are born and we all are going to die at some point. Whether we lock ourselves in the house, it doesn't really matter. Our time is coming. It's what we do with these moments. It was their time. It's not because they were least experienced, but they had reached the end of their road. So what will happen between now and the time that I reach the end of my road? And I made a decision that I was going to be a lot more deliberate with every moment. I was going to climb more. I was going to climb a lot more carefully. I was going to look at what did I see that made people a lot more efficient, a lot better climbers than I was. In 2014. I climbed a few mountains in the Himalayas before I came home. I started running. I started cycling. I became excited to go back and try all these and build more libraries and do a lot more, because that year I actually came home and I raised enough money to feed over 60,000 children at school. And that for me was a summit in itself. I don't know them, but I pray that, through that act, some light has been shown. One of them will be something. One of them will do something amazing for the next person. And for me, I saw those as summits in themselves and got me excited to go and do more.
Mm-hmm. And then you went again and there was an earthquake and another avalanche.
Yeah, so that was 2015. I went back in 2015, and between Camp 1 and Camp 2, this is the Western Kum, and we going up, climbing towards Camp 2. And this is when we're doing a rotation. So you climb towards Camp 2, and the plan was, if we don't get to Camp 2 by 2:00, wherever it is that we are, we turn back and sleep at Camp 1. Mm-hmm. When suddenly the glacier beneath us started vigorously shaking us like leaves. I remember Nawang, my Sherpa, turning around, because it was just the two of us. Others had gone in front and others were behind. And he turns around and he hooks his carabiner onto my harness and he says, "Sarah, we are jumping." So the idea was, if a crevasse opened beneath us, we needed to jump onto the same side. And I just was watching his feet. And it was confusing. We didn't know what was going on. We didn't understand. Felt like 5 minutes, but I believe it was just less than 2 minutes. And it stopped. So he started taking the carabiner off. We both confused because we don't see any avalanches. We don't know what's going on. And he takes off the carabiner, and immediately after, Numtse, Lhotse, and Everest, which are the mountains surrounding the Western Kum, started avalanching towards us. Oh man, Nawang just started praying. oh money, pay me home. And I remember watching him and thinking, dude, this God of yours I learned about 2 days ago, he ain't saving me. And I find that, Elizabeth, that process changed me as a leader. Because when he said, let's jump a crevasse, which knowing what I know today, would probably have killed both of us. He was assertive, he had hooked me up, and he had 22 years experience in that year. And I was going to follow him. But when he looked scared and he was praying, if he was saying, let's go left, I was going to go right because, we were not aligned. And I find that it's important as a leadership today with what's happening around the world. The world is shaking around us. How are we showing up as parents, as leaders? Whether it's organizational leaders, community leaders, or country leaders, how are we showing up? Are we showing up the way he did in the first instant or the second instant? So the mountain once again was closed, and I came home to people saying, wow, you tried. And 2016, I couldn't go back because I couldn't afford it. I mean, in the process, I was also writing all these sponsorship letters, asking for people to support. I think we wrote probably over 200 proposals and nobody. I mean, some people, I even got one saying, nobody like you has done this. What makes you think you can? Another one was, who's the man taking you? And all these things also changed my thinking and also why I was doing it evolved. It was more than just the library. It became about representation as well. Why can't I be given the same benefit of the doubt that their counterparts are given? Why do I need a man to climb or summit Everest? There are women guides that are out there. So it became more than just, building the libraries and so forth. So 2016, I was training, I was cycling, and unfortunately on the 8th of August, 2016, while I'm at home, I couldn't go back to Everest because I couldn't afford it that year. I fell off my mountain bike, which left me in a coma for just over 2 weeks and in ICU for the rest. So 3 weeks in a hospital, cracked my head quite badly. They didn't think I would make it. I woke up in the third week. I remember leaving the hospital and the doctor just saying, don't get back on the bike because another concussion, we're not going to be able to put you together again. So I got out. September, I started walking because I couldn't even run. October, I started running. November, I had at the beginning of the year bought a Soweto marathon entry. And I decided, no one wanted
a marathon entry, you said?
Yeah, marathon entry. Soweto Marathon is one of the big marathons that we have, like Boston.
Yeah.
So I went to do my marathon. At the time in my mind, I was like, I'll just do half, Yeah. And I got there and I found people that were doing 42, celebrating and dancing, and everybody's just, anxiously waiting for the gun to go before they start running. And I decided to do the full marathon. When I finished it, I remember crying and jumping. I've got pictures where I've jumped. And the next day I was at the hospital and said, doctor, if I could run 42 kilometers, surely I can still climb the mountain. It was the first time I even entertained going back to Everest. And I went back in 2017. So 2017 was my third attempt, third time lucky. What could go wrong? I just went with a different attitude, but obviously not the same person that I was when I attempted 2014 and 2015. Unfortunately, in 2017, I went all the way up to the South Summit, which is about 99 meters from the top. The wind, we miscalculated the weather window. Knowing what I know today, if we had pushed to the summit, I don't think we would have made it down because we got there and Nawang was struggling. I was struggling. And I said to him, but I've got extra oxygen because I had bought extra oxygen in case we needed to use more or we needed to wait another day at higher camps. So he said, okay, let's go down because all my teammates had actually gone back, to Camp 4. And as we started going down, what we didn't realize is there was something wrong with my oxygen supply. So I was inhaling and exhaling the same air. I had all this ice that had blocked all the
valves.
airway.
The
valves. That's it. And I was inhaling and exhaling the same air for over 5 hours, for probably about 6 hours. And I turned around and said to Nawang, but why am I still feeling weak? Because you should actually be feeling better as you go down. And he says, no, let's go. We can see the camp, and we could see it. We could see the tents. And before I knew it, Elizabeth, this is in the death zone. I lost consciousness. Mm-hmm. He couldn't help me. He wasn't doing well himself. So he went, this is now hearsay, he says he went to the camp because it was close, got other shepherds, they picked me up. When we got to camp, the winds had blown off our tent. So sleeping bag, like everything we left in the tent was gone. He took a makeshift tent, put me there. He changed my oxygen tank, which probably saved my life. And I remember the next day, somebody touching me. In the night, I was going in and out of consciousness, not knowing where I was. And in the morning, I felt somebody touching me. And then, I woke up and I looked and I said, Lakpa, this was another shepherd. And he says to me, oh, you are alive. I'm like, of course I'm alive, but I'm hungry. So all they did is change my oxygen tank and just left me there. And if, I got out and I said, I'm not going to go into the stretcher. And I looked at Everest because it's like in your face. You can really see it there. So close and yet so far. And the things that went through my mind is whether all those people that said I couldn't, I didn't belong on the mountain, whether they were right. For the first time, I wondered whether my naysayers were right and I was wrong. I was just being stubborn. Mm-hmm. I walked down to Camp 2. I was airlifted. I came home. Inside, I had just really given up, but I didn't verbalize it. The one thing that mountaineering and adventure has done is changed my lifestyle. I train whether I'm going on an expedition or not. So I continued training. And my youngest son, he was 15, 2018, came to me one time in the lounge and said, Mom, when are you going back to Everest? It's not, are you going back, but when are you going back? Because in his mind, she can't have given up. She's always pushing me to do stuff, learn from it, go back, and I said 2020. But, I lost a friend in 2019, the person that actually told me no Black African woman had summited Everest because I didn't know that. Mm-hmm. And 3 weeks later, I found myself on Everest. I did a lot of things differently. And I was able to summit and make history 66 years after the mountain was first summited.
That's an amazing story. And as you're talking, I'm thinking about lessons about when are you so close, but it's smarter not to go all the way. When you make that decision, how you make that decision. I don't think any of us could know until we're actually in a situation like that. But certainly situations that are not like life and death, but in business, there are times where you think, oh, if I just go a little bit further, I mean, even something as ordinary and stupid as I'm going to work another hour and I will finish this. And of course, that last hour's worth of work is terrible and you have to redo it in the morning anyway. That's a very small, everyday example of the sort of thing to say when you're not listening to your body, when you're not paying attention to the area around you, it is a challenge. It is a challenge to say, how do you decide? I'd be curious. You talk about knowing our strengths. So for someone who's not you and not as amazing as you are, as an ordinary person, how do you find your strengths and find your why?
Yeah. Can I first start with what you just touched on about knowing when to go back? On Everest, the majority of people that die, they actually die going down. Recognizing that summiting Everest is actually you going to the summit and back at Everest Base Camp. It's what we call summit fever, where I can see it, I must go at all costs, but do you have enough oxygen? Do you have enough strength to actually come back? It's sanity at some point has got to prevail. It's knowing that going back now is actually a win because the mountain will always be there. And sometimes we lose sight of that. You talk about that 1 hour and the work is mediocre. I actually cost you an account. And
Yes.
then you haven't won. You've actually lost, and you could have won. I think it's understanding, is this a war or the battle?
Yes. Is it a war or the battle? Yes. Yeah.
So knowing my strength is something that I encountered actually in corporate. Funny enough, I was being coached, and this coach took me through a strength finder kind of strength finder process. And for the first time, as somebody that grew up in an environment where at school you had to go for remedial classes, you needed an extra teacher if you're not good in maths. So the focus was on stuff that I'm not good at, but I will never be the best at that, and ignoring that I could actually be a poet because that's what I loved. And what this opened my mind to is how I can focus on what I'm good at and be excellent at it, and appreciating what I'm not necessarily great at, and partnering and collaborating with people that are great at that. And I think that's what attracted me to this way of coaching, where you understand that we all have strengths, and we all have strengths that are less than others. And if we focus on what we're good at and let other people in the team do what they naturally are good at, don't have to put so much effort, we would be a lot more efficient. And I think that excites me. That's what I do. And even, you rock up on Everest and you find people, because they've got money, they've been CEOs for years, they want to be CEOs to the Sherpas. No, he's the boss. Allow him to exercise his strength in that environment, because his win is your win. It's appreciating the fact that there's enough space on the summit for everybody. And not everybody has got to play the same role. But everybody's got to be focused on the summit, because that's the vision. That's the aim.
That's actually very, very important. I noticed that one of the things that you talk about is making choices with what's available. And I think that's where this would touch on it too, is to choose, looking at what's available and then making a smart choice instead of a choice full of pride.
Yes, absolutely. I think we make choices every day. Sometimes choosing not to do something is a choice. I think if you understand where your strengths are, you understand what your reason for being is, or just understand what is important to you, it's easy to know what to let go. I give my own example. Because I couldn't find funding, I had to change my holiday plans. So I didn't take holidays. I didn't change cars every 2-3 years, like most people in my environment do, because my funding was going to this thing that was important to me. I also illustrate that by saying, if there's an accident on the highway, if the destination you were going to was time sensitive and was that important, you off-ramp, find another way and still go there. But if it wasn't important for that day, you do it another day. You phone somebody. So it's understanding what is important to you, and appreciating that, and making a choice in terms of what you're going to prioritize and what you let go of. Do you really need that other dress? Do you really need the next car? Or do you need the next iPhone? Is the one that you have working fine? And what else is there that's important? We make choices every day, but I don't believe that we're always conscious of what it is that we're letting go of when we make certain choices. And for me, it's conscientizing people to choices, because life is about choices. Do I get out of bed or do I not? What do I gain from getting out of bed and what do I lose? It's really, sometimes it's that binary, but you and not making a choice is making a choice.
That, I think, is a great line for us to finish on, is not making a choice. Make a choice or not make a choice, but it is a choice. Sarah, this is so much fun and so interesting, so inspiring to talk with you. I love the part about making choices. A choice even a choice to not do something is also a choice. Can you give us something to leave us with? If people will take one thing from your story, what would it be?
I think the one thing is knowing that we are all uniquely extraordinary, and being ordinary is a choice. And I'll tell you why. When I started climbing, I said, I'm just an ordinary African woman trying to reach extraordinary heights. And what I've realized is that, no, I am uniquely extraordinary. Only I can do what I can. My purpose is unique to me. And if I don't rise up and actually put my best foot forward, then that's it. It won't be achieved. And being ordinary is when I try and be like somebody, try and emulate something. I can never be them. I can never beat them. So if we forget everything, if people forget everything that we said, it's to remember that everybody is uniquely extraordinary, and being ordinary is a choice.
That's a wonderful way for us to end. Thank you, Sarah, so much for having been on Speakers Who Get Results. This has been Speakers Who Get Results. And let me remind you that if you're curious how your presentation skills are doing, you could take our free 4-minute assessment where you can find out where you are strong with presentation skills and where perhaps a little bit of support could get you the results you need and the recognition you deserve. You can find that at www.speakforresultsquiz.com, and you'll find out how you're doing, where you could use a little help, and how to get the recognition that you deserve. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us. I will see you all on the next one.
We have just concluded another great episode of Speakers Who Get Results with your host, Elizabeth Bachman. If you got value from today's episode, please feel free to share us with your friends and colleagues. You may also visit elizabethbachman.com for additional resources. Be sure to tune in every week for new episodes, and thanks for tuning in.